this computer. All right, we got a big crowd here, Madeleine. Guys, you want to let her know how well you like the film?
Thank you. Wow.
The film is devastating. And I'm just devastated having just watched it. I also got to watch last week's City of Joy. And so I'm going to ask her first question. This is the way we do it. We just have people kind of come up and talk to you instead of trying to have you like see a big room where you can't really see faces. And they'll come up and introduce themselves. But first of all, welcome to UVU, Utah Valley University. Thank you so much for taking this time.
Oh my God. No, thank you. Thank you so much for asking me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for making such an incredible film. And I want to ask you one question. I'm going to ask you one question before I turn over this line. And it's probably a complicated question, so it's kind of unfair of me because I'm going to ask sort of a question that has multiple layers. And both of these films are similar in that they are talking about, they sort of have a single anchor protagonist who's doing amazing things to help people who have just suffered from like the worst human atrocities. And so my question is really, how are you getting involved in both these two films, this one particularly, but also the other one I'm curious about? And I guess I should ask where in the process are you getting involved? And normally, in my experience with the documentary, you kind of follow a lot of people and kind of find a lot of different stories. And how did you kind of settle on the different stories that you ended up with?
Yeah. I could answer that question for several hours now. I'm trying to think of how to. With City of Joy, should I start there?
Yeah.
City of Joy, so Eve Ensler, who wrote the Vagina Monologues and is one of the founders of City of Joy, I had actually taken a class with her in graduate school, and she had really loved something that I had written, and we had stayed in touch. And then she knew that I was an editor, primarily, or almost exclusively, actually, at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but Eve, she was always traveling all over the world with her organization. And she called me up one day and she was like, sometimes when I'm in different parts of the world, somebody's following me with a camera and, I don't even know what they're shooting, whatever. Oh, is there a technical?
Sorry, somebody's just, hey, can you stop talking, please? Sorry. Somebody's phone.
Oh, no, that's all right. I could make this so long-winded, so I don't want to. But basically, she called me up and she said, could I just send you the footage from all these different locations and see what you think, do something. So she sent me footage from that people were following her from different locations. Yeah. And when I saw the footage from Congo, it was from not what's our film, but the first time Eve had ever gone to Congo. She was hearing stories from these women who had witnessed the most horrible atrocities, to themselves, to their children, to their families. Yeah. And I made a couple little pieces for the Eve's website, whatever. But I was so utterly struck and in awe and just like floored by the strength of these women, that they still had this will to live. And at the time, Dr. Mukwege, Christine, and Eve were starting to conceive of this idea of City of Joy. And so basically I said to Eve, I think there's a movie here. Right. And, I think we should document what's going on. And she said, go for it. So that was it. It was really the awe of these human beings. And then, of course, going to Congo so many times and getting to know Dr. Mukwege and Christine, and then Jane, and the women, the first class of girls at City of Joy was just, that took it to a whole nother level. So I guess you could say I got in very early.
Yeah, seems like it. So yeah. I'd love to just talk to you more about that, but can you talk about your entry into the Beyond Utopia now?
Yeah. Sorry, I went on for a bit.
No. It's so I just want to share you is all. I don't want to.
Yeah. So on Beyond Utopia, the producers, I had worked with them as an editor on a narrative and a documentary, and they had approached me. They had acquired the rights to Hyeonseo Lee's memoir, which is called The Girl with Seven Names, and it was about a defection that had occurred more than 20 years previous. And they said, we just acquired this book. We were thinking of doing it as a narrative, but we think it also could be an interesting documentary, and we would love for you to direct it. And I was like, initially, I mean, I thought there were so many things. I thought, why me, for so many reasons?
Right.
Why not have a Korean director? Why, I didn't have a personal connection at that time to North Korea. I didn't know anything more about North Korea than anyone else I knew. I knew what we see on the news. I had a vague sense of this horrific place, but I really didn't know. And they said, look, just read it and see what you think. So I read it, and it was fascinating, but I said, I still don't know why I would do this. And also, I really would not want to do a documentary that was like a recreation of something in the past.
Right.
And they just said, take more time. And so what ended up happening was I just started reading and researching, and I became sort of obsessed. And I think, one of the things that I found, because I did this incredibly deep dive into the web and like using VPNs and searching in different languages from different countries, and I got onto North Korean propaganda sites, and like I found this hidden camera footage that some of it's in the film, that these incredibly brave North Koreans have been shooting, through like out of their pockets and out of paper bags, knowing that if they're caught, they'll be killed, since the 1990s, since the famine. And they've been trying to smuggle that footage out. And when I saw that footage, it was like I started to feel this pulse of the people, and that what I was feeling up against their utter absence, right, in our media, was like that gulf was so big that I, like months into this, I was like, you know what? This country has been around for 70 years. Nobody's done this. These people deserve to be heard. Like, this is outrageous. And this movie has to be made. And that started me on a whole nother journey where I started going to South Korea. I knew that if I were to do this, I definitely wanted it to be, after 70 years, like the people of North Korea, if we're going to do a film about them, I wanted us to really, as much as possible, try to experience what life was like for them and put us in their shoes. And so I always had this kind of vague idea of a present tense escape, juxtaposed with other things. I started other things in my research that I was going to like piece together this tapestry in a way to try to crack open this world. And I read about, on my second or third trip to Seoul, I read about Pastor Kim. I, pursued him. And he and I, it took many, many months for us to get to know each other, and then to really realize that we trusted each other, and also that we were really interested in doing the same thing, which was exactly that, something that really people couldn't turn away, and they had to like feel what these people were feeling. And when Pastor Kim and I decided to work together, we thought, we should, like you said, we should shoot two escapes, not knowing what was going to happen. And at the time, Hyeonseo was also a bigger character, so I had this kind of this structure that was a little bit different, whatever, in my mind. And we decided to try to follow the next two stories that contacted Pastor Kim, and those were Soyeon and the Rowe family. We did not follow any other families, but I did have to give up in the structure. When you said, how did you decide? Like, I had been, before I met Pastor Kim, I had been doing, because I wanted something present tense. And with Hyeonseo, her defection was 20 years previous. But what she was experiencing in the present tense is she was, at the time, the most high profile defector, speaking out against the regime, incredibly intelligent, beautiful, successful. She'd written her memoir. But she was one of the most traumatized people I've ever met in my life. And so it was like this whole other, it was a different kind of thriller. It was a psychological thriller about life in Seoul. It was and that footage, which I still have, and Hyancio and I have talked about doing something, but I wanted that to be in the film. And so for so long, I tried to sort of find a structure that could contain that as well. And ultimately, unless it was going to be a series, which we considered for a while, I knew I had to sort of reduce it down. But I hope that
It's so great. Yeah, it's such a great context. We've got a long line of people. They're going to come up. They're going to say your name, their name, not your name, and introduce themselves. And I also want to mention that my colleague Jenny is on the Zoom here. So Jenny, if you have a question, you can always pop on in between any of these people. Feel free. There she is. And so come on up. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Such a shame a spectacular film like yours is about something so horrible, you know, so applause, but also.
Yeah.
No, because I do voice impressions because I want to be a voice actor later in the future, and I joke that I'm a monster, but
Yeah.
like honestly, I don't want to show it in front of people. I want to cry. It's so awful.
Yeah.
No, but so I think you already dived into stuff. And also, by the way, I'm Isaiah Razor. I'm a junior and I'm doing script writing, but I also want to do voice acting and acting because I've loved doing that. And okay, so again, you mentioned beforehand, like as soon as you saw that footage, like then you were like, we need to make this movie. My attempt at a question, assuming it works out logistically, is like, what was like you made this to get the word out, you made like, and hopefully it was to make money respectfully as well, you know, and do well. But what would you say was your like main like what did you want to happen after like you wrapped up filming, like what was your main intention after you released the film, you know? So
Really, yeah, that's a good question. My main intention was that, you know, the people of North Korea are heard and not forgotten, you know, and that continues and that starts to affect change because, you know, I mean, it's so tricky with North Korea because, like you said, I mean, monster, right? I mean, you know, and it is an incredible, I mean, there's a whole another conversation, but it's obviously an incredibly difficult country to deal with on so many levels. But in terms of everyone that I've spoken with, everyone involved in the film, I mean, you know, one consensus is that really change ultimately is going to come from the inside. And part of it is like this exchange of information that we need to know what's going on with North Korean people, which is what this film is trying to do. And then North Korean people need to know something more about the outside world because, you know, the only way you can ask for something, right, is if you have a sense of entitlement. And in North Korea, you know, people have had such little sense of entitlement. I mean, partly because of the whole mythology that, you know, North Korea, as hard as it is, because people know that it is hard and they endure. That's a word that North Koreans use a lot. They endure life. As hard as it is, they are brought up to believe that the rest of the world is actually harder. So, you know, this, yeah. So this exchange, there, that's why they, you know, sing the song "Nothing to Envy" because they are taught that they are actually in the best country in the world. And so it's my goal is that, you know, that North Korea is upended from the inside out, you know, and anything that this film can do, I mean, the first step has to be, again, this exchange of information. And I should say the subjects in our film, Soyeon and the Rowe family, are making a film right now.
oh, that's
which
cool.
is, yeah, which is like a follow-up to this. So, I mean, sort of. It's going to be a short, but it's basically about their lives now and from their own perspective. And they're doing, I'm going to be consulting on it, but like they're doing it on their own. So they're traveling the world with the film as well. I mean, they're really advocating with, you know, all over the world for the people of North Korea.
I do want to say I was kind of like you with like only knowing small things from the news. So I knew they were a bunch of you know, monsters, but you know, that really things I've seen growing up from other videos and stuff. I don't know, but other people have to
Yeah.
do stuff. So I don't know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
Yeah, my name is Fraser Perez. I am a junior and I am in the directing track. I was just wondering, so I had taken a look at your portfolio and it's very impressive. It ranges from projects of varying sizes and budgets and productions. And I was just wondering if you could speak more to your personal experience in the differences between films of larger proportion when compared to smaller independent productions that many of me and my classmates will be engaging in.
Yeah, I mean, I have very consciously in my editing tried to go back and forth between documentary and narrative. And, you know, for a number of reasons, but one of them is just sort of wanting to keep my brain flexible and always have a different challenge and not get into any kind of rote, you know, ideas about storytelling or structure, because I think every film has its own language, its own, you know, structure, its own um, visual sense, everything. Um, so, I mean, mostly I've been in the, you know, indie world. I have done a couple of, you know, larger budget narratives as an editor. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, it's the same. It's the same in the sense that you're you're trying to make the film work. You're dealing with story. You're dealing with structure. With a narrative, you're dealing with performance. You know, tone, all that stuff. It's different in the sense that, you know, there's more people involved. There's more, you know, in the indie world, as you know, it's like for me also as director and editor of this, like I was so alone with this material also for so long. And even as an editor with a director, it's me and the director, you know, and in the larger budget ones, it's definitely different. You don't have the same, I mean, you still have that enclosed space, but you also have, certainly with a studio, you know, the studio has a lot more involvement in a different way. I don't know if I'm answering your question,
Oh,
but
yeah, you are.
I
That's
think
great.
ultimately, like the challenge is the same. When I'm in the editing room, whatever budget is, it's like trying to figure out what the story is and how to tell it, and you know, it's all the same challenges. It's just, you know, some have more visual effects and some have.
Awesome. Well, thank you
But
so much.
thanks, thank you.
Good evening, or what
Hi.
time it is. I'm Luis
Yeah.
Alvarado. I'm a freshman here at UVU. I wanted to study like comedy or animation myself, but
Oh,
I
cool.
was wondering, like, when you made your entire project, how much time, money, and like your like the team having to like disagree on everything, how was it over there?
I mean, so this project, it took, I mean, first of all, because I didn't even meet Pastor Kim until uh, my second or third trip to Seoul, I knew I was looking for something, but meanwhile, I was also working with Hyuncio. So all told, God, now it's been so, okay. It was, I mean, it was basically like 5 years, basically 5 years, which is actually, but on and off. I was editing, you know, films in between. Like I would go over and shoot with Hyuncio, let's say, come back to the United States, go back and shoot with Hyuncio. Then when I met Pastor Kim, it was many months of us, sometimes in South Korea, but sometimes on Zooms, you know, getting to know each other. Then there were concentrated periods once we started following the Rowe family and Soyeon, you know, when obviously we had to be over there. But then there was the whole editing process, which was, you know, sort of because this wasn't a big budget film, you know, we also couldn't, it's not like I was working full time for 5 years at all. I had to do other jobs to, you know, make a living. Um, but figuring out that structure, letting go of certain things was a process for all of us, you know, and because I was director and editor, I was the one most, there was a lot of alone time, but I also, had creative producers. We had amazing executive producers who were also involved in that journey. But it was very much sort of on and off, long periods, shorter periods. Because in documentary, you have to find the story, and then you have to dig. I mean, depending if it's like a sports doc about someone who's right there, it's one thing. But if it's sort of a more investigative thing, there is a whole process to that as well. And sometimes it takes a while to find the stories that you're going to follow. And did I answer that?
Yeah. Also, were there like some, like speaking of disagreements, like was
Mm.
there like more parts you want to like put into your film, or is there like something you wish the following film after Utopia, in which you can dig deep further in?
I mean, it was hard for me to give up all this stuff that I was shooting with Hyansio because it was very resonant, and it is very resonant and in a very different way. But it also had an experiential quality, which was really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something visceral, as I said. That was hard. And that was, I mean, disagreements on that. It was more a process of, I mean, we did have, some people wanted to do it as a series. Some people wanted to do it as a feature, as one feature. And that, I knew from the get right away, I knew intuitively or instinctively that I wouldn't be able to fit all these stories in unless it was a series or a double feature. So there was some, we'll just try to fit everything in. It was like, well, I know it's not going to, work. There was some of that. I mean, there were definitely disagreements later over silly things like the title, stuff like that. But, I was very lucky in this, in a lot of ways, in the sense that the producers did give me a lot of trust. And, of course I had to make compromises when there's things in the structure that still bug me. I wish I could, do a little bit differently or whatever. But that's the nature of film. That's true with almost every film, that there's stuff in retrospect that and that's okay. Like that's part of, I think, the learning process, is that a film is never like, it's done, but it's still alive somehow.
Yeah, I think that's
So
for today then. Thank you.
what? Oh, thank you.
Hi, Madeline. My name is
Hi.
Thomas Menzie. Yeah, it's my first semester as a digital cinema major at UVU. I don't know exactly what I want to do yet, but my question was kind of relating to what you said earlier about that period of time where you had to build a relationship with Pastor Kim. I was wondering if there was like a similar period where the family that we were following had to, get comfortable being around all those cameras while they were escaping.
Yeah, so that was really, an unprecedented experience for me. I mean, when we decided to do this, Pastor Kim and I, we knew, certainly, let's say with the Rowe family. So Ayan was already living in South Korea. She was aware of documentary film. She very much wanted to be a part of this. But the Rowe family, they had fled, once when we heard about them, when Pastor Kim heard about them, they were in China. They had just fled over the border. And as you see in the film, his network, basically, they happened, luckily for them. Most North Koreans do not get this lucky, but they, ran into a farmer in Shanghai, on Shanghai Mountain. And that farmer was not someone who immediately turned them into the police. That farmer had, some sort of sympathy for their situation. And that person knew someone who knew someone who knew someone who eventually knew Pastor Kim. And Pastor Kim got that call. And, but we knew that, the Rowe family had a brother and sister who were already in South Korea. They very much wanted to do this. they allowed, let's say, some level of shooting to go on. But what we knew is that it didn't matter what we shot. We had no rights to use any of the footage because this is a family that, had fled over the river. They didn't know anything about the outside world. They didn't know anything about the geography. They don't come from a country that has a culture of documentary. They don't know what a documentary film is other than the propaganda films on state TV in North Korea, which are not documentaries. So we had to, everybody had to take risks, but the risk that we had to take, or one of them, and there were many, was going into this knowing that we couldn't ask for or accept consent at all until way down the line, if they were lucky enough to make it out. And, that we had to be okay with the very strong possibility that we might not be able to use anything that we were shooting. And that was actually like a conflict, obviously, with the producers, but also at a certain point, we all realized that that was the way it was. And that the only chance we had to make a film like this was to take that risk. And so in the end, we didn't know if we could use any of this until after they were way settled into South Korea. With Soyeon, ironically, because she was, I hope I'm not going on too long, but she was, the one who lived in South Korea, knew what she was getting involved with. But when her son was turned in to the police by the North Korean brokers, and all of that happened, we wanted Soyeon to not give us consent until she saw actually the film. And I was shooting with Soyeon because it's so hard to get accurate information out of North Korea, and it takes so long. And so I was shooting with Soyeon really up until very soon before our premiere, because we were trying to make sure we had the most up-to-date information. And because I was editing the film, I was actually editing 2 versions of the film, one that had Soyeon in it and one that didn't. So ironically, the Rowe family gave their, with Soyeon, because of what was going on with her son, we didn't want to accept consent until she knew exactly what the film was going to look like. Did she want to be involved or not? And so that, it was crazy. I was editing 2 versions of this movie until just weeks before we premiered. And then Soyeon, saw it and she was like, no, I definitely want to do this. And so that was because usually in a documentary, I mean, you do get some degree of consent before you shoot, but it wasn't possible here because we were trying to do something. I mean, most people who meet North Koreans, they meet them after they're in South Korea. They've, acclimated a little bit. What we were doing was so unprecedented. We met these people, just so shortly after they left North Korea. But in terms of the cameras, what you were saying, I mean, I will say every decision, because, am I going on too long?
I don't think so.
Oh, every decision had to be made, with like this whole team of consultants, Pastor Kim, the Underground Railroad, consultants in NGOs, in political spheres, et cetera. And so obviously China, like none of us went into China. Pastor Kim doesn't even go into China. That stuff was only shot by the farmers on flip phones, and then by the brother, Huk Chang, who's in the film, who lives in South Korea, but he met his family halfway through China. And then we were able to go to Vietnam, we were able to go to Laos, but like even there were certain places where only certain people could be, certain cameras could be. And obviously, in terms of the whole trajectory, everything that was shown in a frame had to be, sussed out. So it was very rigorous kind of, process of what could be shown, who could be there, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love the movie, by the way. It was
Oh.
fantastic.
Thank you.
Hey there.
Hi.
I'm Tyson. I just started in the film program here, and I'm hoping to go into post-production.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. You definitely kind of covered a lot of issues that you had putting this all together, but I'm curious if there's something you would consider like the most problematic and kind of how you worked through that.
I mean, there were so many things, but I think the most problematic was, you know, witnessing what Soyan was going through, because when that happened and for so long after that, you know, just, you know, bearing witness to the unimaginable that she was going through. And you know, there's so much footage, it's not obviously all in the movie, but because right when Soyeon heard that her son had been, you know, turned into the police, I mean, she was on the phone with trying to get into North, you know, I mean, this went on for months and months and months and months of documenting this, and just her pain, and just, it was unimaginable, and just trying to help her when, you know, there's no way that any of us can help her, right, with that pain. And interestingly now, like her advocating for her son is actually where she's finding her strength. So she's one of the main people who's traveling the world right now with the film and advocating. But anyway, that was unimaginable, and that was so difficult. And then so many things. I mean, on more of a filmmaking level, I mean, structure, having, you know, also because we in this country and around the world we only know certain things about North Korea. So it was like, as I became so immersed in North Korea, I also had to realize that the audience was where I had been. And so it was like kind of creating the context for this story. So giving enough history, or not history, but like context, but not too much, you know, creating the stakes, understanding early on why these people were willing to risk their life to leave, you know, like just enough, because it wasn't just following escapes of an anonymous group of people from an anonymous country. It was like a very specific country that has such specific, you know, challenges for its people and just horrors for its people, and finding ways to bring the audience in, even the geography, explaining that people don't actually cross into South Korea. I mean, for the most part, they go into China. And so all of that, like finding a way to give that information and lead people on the journey without being too expository and doing too much exposition, that was a whole, you know, but there were so many challenges. But emotionally, what Soyeon was going through was really hard.
Thank you.
But thank you.
I'm just gonna kill this.
You're fine. Hi,
Bye.
my name is Kiara. I'm a freshman in college and I'm hoping to go into cinematography. My question is, do you hope this film will make people fight for the citizens of North Korea that clearly cannot fight for themselves, or was there another hope when creating this film?
I mean, my hope when creating this film, my goal was really, like I said, to crack open this world and to put us in the shoes of these people who we have basically not even ignored. We just haven't even acknowledged, right, for more than 70 years. But yeah, absolutely, because the people of North Korea don't yet have voice. They don't. And, you know, little by little, the people inside North Korea are at least the ones who live closer to China, closer to the border, are starting to have some awareness of the outside world. But for people who are inland from there, you know, in North Korea, they're not, you know, because there's a whole movement, largely of defectors, of trying to get information into the country. This is what I should say. And so the people near the border, because that river between China and North Korea is fairly porous, no matter what Kim Jong-un does, and he's done everything to try to stop information from coming in and out, but there is some that gets in. But the people who see that, who see like films from South Korea or wherever else, they live near the river, and people inland do not get exposed to any of that. And so, you know, and even the ones near the river can't speak up for themselves because, you know, there's absolutely no human rights, right? There's no freedom of speech. There's no, people can't even trust sometimes their own spouses because it's such a, you know, the Kim regime has kind of created this, you know, brilliant, you could say, in a way, system of people spying on each other and, you know, keeping people hungry enough and miserable enough that they don't have time or energy to focus on anything beyond survival. And so people will do things for survival, and they'll sometimes, you know, turn on each other or whatever. So it's sorry, I'm going off, but yes, absolutely, the people of North Korea cannot adequately advocate for themselves, and you know, they don't have internet. They can't even really communicate with each other that in the way that the Arab Spring could. So yeah, we have to, you know, we have the rest of the world. I feel like every time we mention North Korea in the news, every time we mention the missiles and Kim Jong-un and all of that, we have to mention the people every single time. And, you know, that hopefully there's going to be some kind of ripple effect if we keep their presence in the foreground, which we have to do.
Thank
I
you.
hope that answered it. Thanks.
No, you can step up right up.
Okay. Hi, I'm Brigham. I'm
Hi.
studying photography.
Cool.
Beautiful film, by the way. My question kind of has
Thanks.
to relate to your psychology of making this and how it's being done. But you formed all these relationships. This is something that I kind of wonder about because I want to go into documentary filmmaking as well. You spent 5 some odd years on this. How do you close it out for you mentally? How do you step away from the film? Do you step away from the film now saying, I've made all these connections, I won't really see these people probably that much anymore or have a ton of communication? What's that kind of process like for you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. It's really hard. I mean, so Pastor Kim and Soyeon were traveling with us for most of last year. And actually the Rowe family were with us some as well. So that was great. I mean, we were spending so much time together. You know, after the BAFTAs, because we were nominated for a BAFTA, right? After the BAFTAs, everyone kind of dispersed. And it's been so hard. I mean, you know, Pastor Kim and Soyeon, they have been in DC a lot. Pastor Kim's actually in the United States right now. Soyeon's not, but like so we have seen them some, but it's not that we don't have that continuity. And, you know, we know that it's not going to be the same. I mean, the good thing is that Soyeon and the Rowe family are making this film. So there's that, you know, for me, that interaction. Soyeon is, she was just invited to Romania. Actually, I was invited as well, but I can't go. Oh, sorry, to Bulgaria. But so I was hoping I could go and see her, but I can't go. But she's going to be popping in and out of the United States. As I said, Pastor Kim's here right now. But it's hard. It's like if you've done theater, you know, in theater, everyone does a show and then closing night. It's like it's so hard, and it is somewhat like that. But we're all like family, you know. The problem is we're all so far away. It's not always like that, obviously. You know, there's a film that I've been shooting for a while in New York, so like those people I'm with, you know. But it's hard. It is hard because it becomes such a part of your life, and you know, I don't know how to answer that easily. But it's something that I've been thinking about a lot because we were together so much last year, and now it's like little pockets of time that we see each other. But
Thank you. No, that's perfect.
okay, thanks.
Hello, I'm Isaac.
Hi.
So I'm a junior here and I'm studying directing. And I just had a question about like how you went about editing this and kind of keeping with all of the tones and emotionality of the film so that when you move from one scene, it kind of continues on into another. Because when you're in this documentary style, you're getting all sorts of different footage and different things like that. So how do you edit so that's all just cohesive and maintains that true tone?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, that's so much the challenge of editing, right? And in any film, really. But obviously in something like this, like you're saying, when you've got such different quality of footage, different, just formats. I mean, okay, sound is a big thing for me in editing always. Like whether it's narrative or documentary, I do a lot of sound work in the Avid. I always have a lot of tracks because I feel like, I mean, sound is so much a part of storytelling. It's not, for me, it's not something you just slap on later. It's like the full picture is the whole thing. And sound is so useful in sustaining, in creating transitions, in morph, even if people aren't conscious of, it's like taking one world or one atmosphere or one scene, whatever, into another, the way you might do a hard cut, or you might like just take that tone and just bury it under the next one and you don't even know. And it helps even when these like disparate, visual elements are coming in. I mean, that's what I love about editing, is the whole challenge of precisely that. How do we make this movie? How do we make it cohesive? How do we take people on a journey? How do we, give them something experiential? How do, and you have all the tools, and sound is one of them. But, and then of course it's structure, like having that sort of, I don't know, I always think of editing in narrative or documentary, because again, in narrative, the script always goes out the window after the first cut, and then you're making a movie, right? So I always think of it like the film has a thread, and you can drop the thread in the middle of the film if you want, but you want to do that consciously. You want to like do it with authority so the audience goes with you. If you drop the thread and you don't have any authority over it, you know what I mean? Like if it just sort of happens, you can lose your audience. So the whole film in a way is like this moving ship. I don't know. I just find that puzzle of, because that thread is sort of unconscious. Sometimes there's an unconscious theme that you're not even conscious of, but like people are kind of tracking, the audience might be tracking, and that helps also, just like sound can help to actually, without realizing it, get to something totally disparate. I don't know, it's such a puzzle, but I love that part of filmmaking, the puzzle of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Spencer Palmer, a graduate of UVU and earning a bachelor's degree in filmmaking. Forgive my embarrassing phone call, but my phone is on silent mode right now.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't even know it was you.
Sorry.
You gave yourself away.
I want to know, what was the funniest moment while creating this documentary?
Well, so Pastor Kim's wife, when she says that she fell in love with Pastor Kim because he looked like Kim Jong-il. I mean, and that was so amazing. And I have such incredible stuff with the two of them. Actually, there's so much funny. I mean, I had longer cuts of them that I wanted in the film, but I couldn't. But she's an incredible character. And yeah, for me, that was really funny. But and that's what's in the film that's funny. And also, of course, the poop story, which is, I don't know if it's funny, but it's Tiancio is very amusing when she tells that story. When I interviewed Tiancio, that was, as soon as she told me that story, I was like, okay, that's in the movie. It has to have like a certain rhythm, whatever. I mean, there's been a different kind of humor, kind of elation of humor of when things, because we had no idea along the way what was going to happen. We didn't know what was around the next corner. And so there's that kind of elation where suddenly we and our subjects would find ourselves kind of laughing, like almost hysterically. And also the fact that we all became so close. We all found there were times when like grandma and I would just look at each other and just start laughing because it's so crazy. It's like it's crazy that that more North Koreans and Americans haven't met, especially fresh out of North Korea, but also that we did meet and that we forged this friendship and stuff. So I don't know, but in terms of the film, it's definitely that moment with Pastor Kim being compared to Kim Jong-il.
Yes, did you know that there's a North Korean couple that successfully escaped North Korea through secret boat routes after the COVID-19 shutdown?
Yes. And by the way, Pastor Kim has he's rescued people by boat as well. Before I met him, he's rescued people every which way, but usually through land, but he's done it through boats.
I hope you reunite with him, the family, and the mother.
Thank you.
We want to tell them that we were so touched by your film, and we are hoping to liberate those North Koreans sooner the better.
Great. They will so appreciate that. I will definitely tell them.
Thank you. And
thanks.
May I turn the time over to my other classmates who are patiently waiting?
Yeah. Thank you.
And P.S., what is your favorite Disney film?
Oh my God. I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head. What's your favorite?
The Lion King.
Oh, that's a good one.
Thank you for.
I don't know what my favorite is, but I'll
Thank you
think
for letting
about
me answering my questions. Now I'll turn the time
Thank
over
you.
to my classmates.
Okay, thank you.
And Madeleine, it's almost midnight where you are. Are you holding up all right? We've got 4 more.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
We have 4 more.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I'm Gabe. I'm a junior here at UVU, and the first thing I wanted to mention, thank you. Like, I really appreciated what you said about like the sound editing, because that was actually something I noticed from the film that like I appreciated, because like a lot of the sounds that like when it was like phone recordings, that like there was like you could notice that there was effort, because you don't like really notice because it becomes invisible when like it all comes together. But like there was clearly a lot of effort that went into that. And my question, I guess, is what did the crew look like for the parts that took place in like the countries where the family was still at risk, and what kind of like was the vibe, or what was the experience with that?
Well, again, so in China, none of us were in China. China was literally just initially the farmer who found them, who ran into them on Shanghai Mountain, and then other people in the Underground Railroad or the Underground Network. I mean, they call it the Underground Railroad of Asia. But Pastor Kim and his network, so on that river border between North Korea and China, which is over 800 miles, Pastor Kim and his network have kept cameras, which are really flip phones, but cameras hidden on that border for years. And those cameras are used for 2 things. One, North Koreans who are interested in taking the risk of shooting the truth of their country are sometimes smuggling those phones over the river into North Korea and then back out. And then also the Underground Network has often shot footage of defections, never to the extent that we did at all, but like those cameras are used to shoot little pieces, and they're used by the Underground network. And the reason for that is because they then smuggle that footage into North Korea to try to give North Koreans some kind of perspective on what it would look like if you wanted to affect what geography is like. This is China, because North Koreans know that's China, but they don't know how big it is. They don't know which way to go once you get, a lot of North Koreans think I've told me they thought once they got to China, they're okay. It's like, but that's not at all the case. So anyway, there are cameras hidden along the border, and the Underground Railroad members of that have traditionally used those. And so in China, those were the only people shooting, other than the family member of the Rowe family, Huck Chang, who you saw, who went and met with them. We were in Vietnam and Laos, but in the jungle part of Vietnam, Pastor Kim would not let me and my producer go into the jungle. And the crew there was our South Korean DP and our South Korean sound recordist. And then Huck Chang again shot some with his cell phone. And also we used different cameras there. In the jungle, we used just like a simple camcorder. And then just there was so many logistics in terms of who's shooting, what cameras can be used. In the van, we always had 2 vans, and Pastor Kim does that on his rescues because the first van can warn the second van, so there's always like a strategy. In the vans, there were certain cameras that could be used, certain people that could be in this van or that van, at the safe houses. I mean, every single step had all sorts of logistical questions, challenges, and every decision had to be made with like lots of voices, starting with Pastor Kim and the Underground Railroad. If that.
Yeah. Right. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm
Hi.
film with a focus on writing and acting. And I just had one question. Were you worried about any retaliation from the North Korean regime against you or Pastor Kim with the release of the movie, or while making it or after?
Yeah. So Pastor Kim has been known by the regime since way before we met him. And he talks about that in the film. And he's had bodyguards offered to him in South Korea several times when South Korea got intelligence that there may be North Korean spies in South Korea. So he's been known by the regime for a long time. He's been targeted. Yeon Lee has also been known by the regime for a long time. She's been offered bodyguards as well. She did not accept them because her feeling was always, if they want to get me, they're going to get me. And but part of what I was shooting with her in that sort of more psychological thriller was what it feels like to feel targeted, to be this person. And that footage is another movie, but I have that footage. So they knew about her. They knew about Soyeon as well, the mother, because Soyeon, actually before I met her, had spoken out before the UN, mainly about violence against women in the military, because that was an issue she was very concerned with. She was in the military in North Korea. So she was also known by the Kim regime. And I found some footage where the Kim regime created videos about her. In terms of us, yeah, definitely. I mean, there were so many unknowns, and but again, it was like at a certain point, it was like, what are we going to do? Not do this? It felt so important to try to do this that there was no turning back. But it was, when we were in Laos, North Koreans were in Laos training the Laotian military, outside of our van. So there was definitely a lot of, there was a lot of fear. And then in terms of retaliation, I mean, one thing that we learned, because we vetted this through so many different sources, and, our film is not about Kim Jong-un, right? He and the Kim regime are the backdrop, because without them, people wouldn't need to flee North Korea, right? But it's really about the people, and what we say about Kim Jong-un, that he's a monster, that he's a strong man, he's a dictator, all this. By all accounts, he's not really bothered that much by that. Like, what bothered him in that film, the interview, the Sony film that he did hack into, was that he was being ridiculed and mocked. And he didn't, that footage of him being mocked, like getting into his country and his people seeing that, that sort of pokes a hole in the whole balloon of his mythology, right? So that really, but that said, of course, there were so many precautions and, you know, and we know Kim Jong-un has seen the film and, you know.
One last question too is that I imagine you had doubts at some point and just like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. What made you just keep going with the project and not stop?
Yeah. I mean, it really was that, you know, like I was saying, it was like, it was so unbelievable what was happening, you know, and it felt so important and so long overdue, right? That North Koreans are given voice. It wasn't as nervous and scared and trepidatious and all the rest that we had. It was like it was impossible to fathom not continuing.
It's pretty inspiring.
It was just, yeah, it was, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hi, Madeline.
Hi.
My name is Nathan Palmer, and I'm going to go into directing and writing. But I mean, thank you so much for all the work you put into this, because I thought it was just a wonderful film. And I guess my question is, I mean, this film is very much a story about like having hope, finding hope and holding on to hope. So I was just curious for you personally, throughout your career as a filmmaker, what's helped you to, I guess kind of asked a little bit already, but what's kind of helped you to keep going through all of your projects and to keep persevering in such a, I guess, competitive industry and keep your passion strong?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us who do work in film, like we are so lucky actually, you know, we are. And I will say that because I'm an editor, that's a huge advantage. I couldn't have done this if I only wanted to be a director. I couldn't have afforded, you know, I'm not a trust funder. Like I couldn't have done it, right? So as an editor, there's so much content out there. I mean, not all of it is interesting, but like there's so much content out there. Editing is actually, just for all you film students, I mean, a skill like editing or cinematography as well. I mean, you know, those are good things to have, because directing, you know, it's very hard to direct one after another. You know, it's difficult. I mean, it's great to do that, but to have something else as well, that has definitely helped me, right? That is, and I didn't do it for that reason. I was an editor. I am an editor, but I can see with friends of mine who only want to direct how difficult it is when there's nothing in between those directing gigs. You know what I mean? And then just, you know, we are lucky, and not every project that I've done as an editor is as interesting as the next, but getting to go into these worlds and getting to tell these stories, whether it's narrative or documentary, is, you know, such a gift, such an honor. And yeah, I mean, but I can't emphasize enough how much having a skill like that helps, you know, in making a living. And right now I'm editing. Oh, shoot. I'm editing, but I'm also shooting on another documentary that I'm directing, right? But if I were only shooting on that documentary, because it's a documentary that's following people over several years, how could I, you know, live? So, but yeah, I kind of feel like what we do is the best thing in the world if we can find a way to do it, and we can if we're creative. And, you know, I don't know if I answered your question at all.
You did. I do. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi.
Hi.
My name's Emily, and I'm actually aspiring to be a director as well. but my big question kind of goes along with what you were just saying about being an editor. If funds weren't an issue, how different would the film be if you were just the director and not the editor?
I mean, I have no idea because, you know, one thing about editors is editors will impact your film in ways that you see and ways you don't see. You know, even in narrative, you know, the first cut is done during the shoot, traditionally in narrative. So the editor is getting footage the day after it's shot. They're putting together the first cut. So often, and not always, but so often those takes, those performances that the editor chooses or whatever, so much of that ends up staying in the film. And then just the whole process after that first cut of making the movie, throwing the script away and making, how do we restructure? What do we have to do to make this film work? Because the script never really completely works, you know, once it's a film. You know, in that process between director and editor, there's so many ways that both of you are impacting the film. So it's so hard to know. I mean, you know, there were times definitely where I was like, shit, I wish I had an editor I could like turn to, like, but I didn't even know who I would trust. That, like, I didn't even, I mean, first of all, I was so far in, that was never a reality, but it was just times when I just wished I could just throw my hands up. But it's, yeah, because as an editor, I don't meet that many other editors because I meet more directors, right? Because I work with, as an editor with directors. So I didn't even know who I would, I don't know. I'm not really answering your question, am I?
Oh, that's perfect.
But directors, I mean, editors will have a huge impact. And so I think with editors, it's like, you really want to trust the way their mind works, because it's not just, it is a skill, but it's really, it's so many things. It's storytelling, it's structure, it's performance, it's tension, it's tone, it's all these things. And with cinematography, it's a lot of things as well, but you can kind of see the technique, you know, more clearly. With editing, sometimes a film, you know, may not work, but actually the editor may have actually made it 10 times better than it would have been, or maybe they made it 10 times worse. Like that, you have to trust them, because they will impact your film on subtle and not so subtle ways. And so, but it's such a great relationship, director editor, and that's where I was kind of schizophrenic for me, because the thing about editor and director, in my experience, is that push and pull, where one person thinks that scene is it's as good as it's going to get, the other one's like, no, it could be better, and then it goes back the other way, and this one now thinks it could be better, and that push and pull is what I think elevates a film. And so trying to wear both hats and push myself from both directions and like try to second guess myself to make sure I was pushing myself was definitely challenging.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Len, thank you so much. This has
You
been,
can see that I can't stop talking.
No, it's so great. And thank you for staying up so late with us and for making these awesome movies that we've been able to watch and spending the time. And it's just been wonderful. It's been a real gift. So thank you so much. And
well, thank you so much.
And definitely, I don't know, Jenny, if you want to say anything, but definitely follow up with Todd so you can be paid for your time. I'm sorry, that's kind of, but he just mentioned to me today he hadn't heard from you yet. So
I did. I sent it today.
Okay, great.
And yeah, I'm so sorry. I've been.
You're what, shooting a movie and editing a movie? That's like you're busy.
Yeah, it's been. But I hope I didn't go on too long, because I really.
You're great. And as the guy who runs the editing track here, I really want to thank you for that plug. That was fantastic.
Oh, cool.
All right. So
yeah, but it's for real. Yeah.
It is for real. It is for real, guys.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you. Really, it was fun. Appreciate it. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you so much. Thanks, Duane.